All right, so we're back. So here it is. The introduction says, quote, "These guidelines should be interpreted consistent with the goal of fostering learning environments that honor, respect, and accept the diversity of the student body," unquote. This statement sounds chic and cool and equitable and all that stuff, but it's actually very laughable. Why? Because if the quote unquote diversity of the student body includes Christian students or students who disagree that a person's sex is mutable or changeable, these students will not receive the quote unquote honor and the quote unquote respect and the quote unquote acceptance. So that's actually laughable, actually. These government schools are despotic, and the goal of despotic governments is complete totalitarian control over every aspect of a citizen's life. I just mentioned that before. The ultimate goal is not to control your speech. Listen carefully. It's to control how you think. They don't even want you to think differently from what they think. Their worldview, their bad ideas. And it continues, quote, "Furthermore, these guidelines will support healthy communication between educators, students, parents/guardians to further the successful educational development and well-being of every student," unquote. This is a complete lie. Why? Because we were told that if students began to identify as transgender, we could not tell parents. So here's my question. How is the decision to withhold pertinent information from parents supporting, quote, "healthy communication between educators, students, and parents," unquote? How is that? I don't understand that. Healthy communication would be that I would share pertinent information with parents because ultimately they're the parents. I'm not. So this statement is not only intended to remove liability. This statement is only intended, is only intended to remove liability from the district. That's all it's intended for. If, God forbid, the student commits suicide because she is not getting the proper support due to her parents' ignorance of what's going on with her psychologically, then the teacher will be culpable. The teacher will be at fault. And the school district has no vested interest in the teacher's exoneration. And this has happened. This has happened, unfortunately, where there's a stress of the student who's going through this and the parents don't know and the student ends their own life. It's happened, unfortunately. And that teacher is now culpable, and that district is not looking for the exoneration of that teacher. The Gospel according to John, chapter 10, verse 7 through 10 says, quote, "And Jesus said to them again, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out. And will go in and out and find pasture. The devil/false prophet does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, they may have it more abundantly." So the strategy of the school district is to widen the gap between the child and the parent. They want to widen that gap between child and parent. And this is demonic, it's dark, and it's destructive, to say the least. So before it was parents involved in large part, then it was babysitting. Now it's like, okay, we drop them off so that the government school can raise the child. And many government schools they actually love that idea. Many government school districts across America have administrators, guidance counselors, and teachers who are recruiting students who have leadership capabilities and are grooming them with transgender ideology. They aggressively work at having this student become a trans student so that she can influence others with this destructive lie. And I'm going to mention this later. People with gender dysphoria, the psychological disorder, okay? First of all, it's a disorder, and Jesus would be loving these people and sharing truth with them, and that's what the follower of Christ should be doing. But this is not what this is about. It's not about that. It's about the government schools under their authority that are imposing and indoctrinating this lie in the lives of students, and they're doing it without the consent of parents. They don't want parents to know. Okay. More guidelines. It says, quote, "School staff shall work with students and their parents/guardians to develop an appropriate plan to accommodate and support specific student needs," unquote. This is another lie. How can school staff work with students and their parents to develop an appropriate plan to accommodate and support specific student needs if the school has no intention of informing parents of the nature of the child's psychological challenges? If you're a parent, I have a question for you. How is it okay for school officials to shape your child's very identity without your consent? How is that okay? I don't know. Maybe someone can explain it. Explain it to me. More guidelines, quote unquote. Quote, if school staff believes that a quote unquote gender identity or expression issue is presenting itself and creating difficulty for the child at school, approaching the student's parents and guardians about the issue may be appropriate, unquote. Now, I'm emphasizing may. And they lack so much leadership, so I'm going to help them out. It's not may, it's informing and approaching parents is appropriate. It is appropriate. And it's the parents' God-given right and authority to make the call. They got to make the call on how they're going to handle the situation with their child, not the government officials. And if the parents make the bad decision, like, yeah, affirming the wrong way, they're accountable before God. But it's the parents' authority. It's not the school's authority. It's the parents' authority. Even though I completely disagree with that decision, if they make the decision, it's the parents' job. Here are more quote-unquote guidelines. Quote, every student has a right to be addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to the student's gender identity, unquote. Here's the forced speech again. Core speech. Regarding the use of incorrect biology, here are some questions I have. What about teachers who have a scientific conviction? What about the ones who have a biological conviction? What about the teachers who have logical convictions? What about the teachers who have religious convictions? What about them? Here's the answer. You know what they say? Tough. Deal with it or else. You're going to lose your life. You're going to lose your liberty. You're going to lose your property, your livelihood first. And then you could actually lose your liberty too. If things keep going the way they're going, the sacredness of life also will be on that list. Here's more nonsense. Quote, check this one out. Quote, the person best situated to determine a student's gender identity is the student, unquote. You guys get that? So in other words, according to this school district, my 8-year-old daughter and my 6-year-old son, because they're the two that are currently school age, they have more knowledge and maturity and wisdom to determine their sex than me or even God himself. How presumptuous, how arrogant, how disrespectful, and how stupid of this government school district. How stupid can they be? It's equally baffling how many parents in America are okay with this government schools trampling their own parental rights. They're trampling on parental rights. Here's more of the absurdity. Quote, students may use locker rooms of the gender with which they identify, unquote, and, quote, students participating in overnight field trips and camps shall have access to facilities that correspond to their, quote, unquote, gender identity, unquote. Wow. So now I want to address the fathers, like the real ones, no wimpy ones, the real ones now. I'm addressing real fathers, the ones who actually have a backbone. Are you okay with hormonal teenage boys entering a girl's locker room or sleeping in the same hotel room on an overnight trip as your daughter or daughters if they simply state that they are transgender females? All this while parents are in the dark about the whole situation. Any real man would never be okay with this. And if a real man who is listening or reading this thinks that I'm aiming to offend you because you are okay with this destructive transgender ideology, yes, you're right. I am. We need to start waking up from this slumber that we're in our society. Now, there's actually more on this topic, but I'm going to transition to wrap this up. First of all, for individuals who have, like I said, a real diagnostic of gender dysphoria, Jesus would love these individuals. He would provide the way for salvation and deliverance, and he would restore them in order for them to know who God created them to be. And followers of Christ, of Jesus, are called to do the same thing. Okay? I'm not even talking about that. Jesus would be ministering and he would be sharing the truth of the kingdom of God with these individuals, okay? And anyone who follows Jesus, you are ordered to love people in the same manner with grace and truth, okay? But I want to say this once again. This blog is not about that, okay? It's about our current current educational trend and how the current educational trend is to use its trusted authority to lie and confuse students. When this lying confusion happens, it's actually child abuse, and we got to call it what it is. When there's indoctrination of an idea that's false and is destructive, that's actually child abuse. And this is what many districts are getting away with because parents are not speaking up. Many proponents of transgender ideology say that it's abuse not to affirm their chosen gender, but this is a lie because according to the American Psychological Association, children who struggle with gender dysphoria almost always overcome this small obstacle with some guidance. But the ones who are affirmed in their incorrect sex will be the ones who struggle with suicidal ideation. So I use, and I apologize because I was looking for that article that I read on the American Psychological Association that was maybe 6 years ago. So I couldn't find it. But so I'll say on that one, don't take my word for it. Just do your own research on that one. So transgenderism is one of the branches of bad fruit that came out of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. This era was a time period when a large part of the populace under a humanistic worldview. Humanistic means I'm the measure of all truth, and truth is what I make it. That's humanism. And this worldview under this worldview, they decided they could be God and determine the correct design for sexuality. They were mistaken. We don't redefine marriage because that was not our idea. We don't redefine correct or good or the right sexuality, what we want to, because we didn't come up with it. That was God's design. It was God's idea. And God's plan is one biological male and one biological female in marriage till death do them part. One man, one woman in marriage till death do you part. That is God's design for sexuality. And everything else is a perversion. I don't care if you're saying, well, I fornicate, but at least I'm not a homosexual. No, you're a pervert in God's eyes because it's a perversion when you deviate from God's design. Solution. Whatever direction you decide to go with your child in child rearing, it is your responsibility and mine to know what is going on in the school your child is. If our children are in government schools, it is our job to be at school board meetings and voice any disagreements that we have about the school district, how the school district is educating our children. All right, that's our job. And I don't care. I mean, our kids go to private school. It doesn't matter. It's my problem. It's 100%. I don't care if our kids don't go to government schools. I'm living in a society where, all right, that I'm not compartmentalized with my faith. All right? And that's what everyone needs to be doing. It is also your job and my job to elect school board members that reflect your values and my values. Whatever those are, they have to be expressed. So I thought this would be harder than it was. Like I said, this season of my life was very, very stressful for me because it drew out for a good probably year and a half. And there's a lot of other things that are not worth mentioning right now because at the end of the day, it's not even about me. It's about these children, about your children, my children. And Jesus said, woe to you. In other words, look out for you who cause these little ones to stumble. And things that are done to children before God's eyes, there is God has a harsher, that's my time. There's a gravity toward God's judgment of all that. So I hope this was informative and more than informative that it calls you to some kind of action. All right. Thanks so much. Take care now.